The Egyptian president urges an end to the Israeli aggression on Gaza. Netanyahu announces lifting the Gaza blockade to allow limited humanitarian aid. And Israel orders the evacuation of Younis amid the imminent attack warnings. You're watching Qnews, and this is our news bulletin. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has emphasized the urgent need to end the Israeli aggression in Gaza, resume the ceasefire agreement, and release detainees. President al-Sisi stressed on the importance of allowing humanitarian aid to enter Gaza and rejected any attempts to displace Palestinians or undermine their just cause. Additionally, he called for international efforts to implement a reconstruction plan for Gaza without displacing its residents. That came as the Egyptian president welcomed his Lebanese counterpart, Joseph Aoun, at the Al Ittihadiyya Palace in Cairo, where official ceremonies included playing both national anthems. The two leaders held a close meeting, followed by extensive discussions focusing on strengthening bilateral relations, particularly in economic cooperation, infrastructure, and reconstruction efforts, while addressing regional stability challenges. They also emphasized support for Lebanon's sovereignty and condemned Israeli violations, reiterating their commitment to the Palestinian cause and the importance of achieving peace and stability in the region. Egyptian sources have revealed that the Egyptian security delegation currently in Qatar is engaged in intensive communications aimed at achieving a ceasefire in Gaza. The sources informed Qnews that Cairo and Doha are making concerted efforts in coordination with the US to halt the escalation in Gaza, while also facilitating negotiations for a truce and allowing humanitarian aid into Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced the lifting of the blockade on Gaza to permit limited humanitarian aid amid growing international criticism of the humanitarian crisis. The aid will include basic food supplies to prevent hunger, although details on the timing and delivery mechanisms remain unclear. This decision, influenced by military recommendations, aims to ensure aid does not fall into the hands of Hamas while continuing military operations against the group. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has stated in a video message that Israel intends to take control of all of Gaza and prevent Hamas from looting aid. This announcement followed Israel's decision to ease its blockade and allow limited food supplies into Gaza, coinciding with the military's initiation of extensive ground operations in various regions of the enclave under the plan named Operation Gideon's Chariots. Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich has stated that the aid designated for Gaza will not reach Hamas. Smotrich emphasized that no assistance would be delivered to Hamas, labeling contrary claims as false and questioning their motivations. While acknowledging the need for basic food and medical supplies for Gaza's residents, he insisted that none would benefit Hamas. He noted that significant changes are forthcoming, with the Israeli occupying army making efforts to direct aid to southern Gaza and potentially to third countries, asserting that this will alter history. The Israeli occupying military has announced the initiation of extensive ground operations in both northern and southern Gaza, intensifying its campaign in the region. That comes as Palestinian health officials reported that Israeli strikes resulted in at least 130 fatalities overnight. This announcement followed indications from both sides that indirect negotiations between Israel and Hamas in Qatar had seen no advancements. The Israeli occupation military says it has struck more than 160 targets across the Gaza Strip in the past 24 hours as part of its ongoing offensive. According to a statement, the strikes targeted infrastructure allegedly used by Palestinian fighters, including anti-tank rocket launchers and weapons storage sites. The operation marks a continuation of Israel's expanded military campaign in the territory. The Israeli occupying military has launched extensive ground operations in multiple Gaza Strip areas, with Palestinian health officials reporting at least 67 fatalities, including numerous women and children. The Israeli occupying forces confirmed ground forces, including reservists, have begun operations under Gideon's Chariots campaign, marking a new phase in the 20-month conflict against Hamas. Israeli military chief of staff Eyal Zamir emphasized the operation's goal of breaking the capabilities of Hamas. The Israeli occupation military has issued a forced displacement order for residents of Younis, Gaza's second largest city, warning of an imminent and unprecedented attack. The evacuation directive also targets the surrounding areas of Beni Suhaila and Abbasen, instructing civilians to flee westwards to Al-Mawasi. This comes as the Israeli occupation military declared Khan Younis a dangerous combat zone as it intensified operations. This comes a day after a similar evacuation order was issued for parts of central Gaza, including Al-Qarara in southern Deir al-Balah. Palestinian casualties from Israeli airstrikes were transported to Nasser Hospital in Khan Younis, Gaza. That comes as smoke rose behind tents as explosions echoed in the background, highlighting the ongoing violence in the region. The Gaza government media office has accused the Israeli military of deliberately targeting medical facilities as part of what it describes as a systematic campaign of genocide. According to the office, ongoing strikes on hospitals are aimed at increasing fatalities and obstructing life-saving care for the wounded. It also held international allies of Israel, namely the US, the UK, Germany and France, responsible for enabling these actions, and called on the United Nations and global human rights organizations to intervene urgently. The statement warned that the international community is at a defining moment that will be remembered in history. The Gaza Health Ministry has reported that Palestinians examined the medicine warehouse at Nasser Hospital following an Israeli strike. Medical supplies were found covered in debris, and the hospital director stated that over 500 patients currently in the facility are unable to receive necessary health services. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, the flow of humanitarian aid, and the unconditional release of all detainees, emphasizing that these steps are crucial for alleviating humanitarian suffering in the region. In a statement on X, he urged attention not only to Gaza but also to the dire situation in the occupied West Bank, highlighting that annexation and settlements are illegal. Guterres reiterated that a two-state solution is the only path to sustainable peace between Israel and Palestine, allowing both states to coexist in peace and security.
Targeting civilians is unacceptable.
The Turkish Foreign Ministry has called for an immediate halt to Israeli military operations in Gaza and urged the entry of humanitarian aid, demanding a ceasefire. In a statement, the ministry noted that Israel's escalation of attacks during ongoing negotiations undermines all efforts for peace and stability, indicating that Israel does not intend to achieve lasting peace. The ministry urged the international community to take effective and decisive action against Israel to establish regional peace and security in line with its legal and humanitarian obligations. Senior Hamas official Sami Abu Zuhri has denied claims that the group agreed to release 9 Israeli detainees in exchange for a 2-month ceasefire. He emphasized that Hamas is open to a mass release of detainees if Israel ends the war under international guarantees. He noted that the group had unilaterally handed over a soldier, then Alexander, to encourage negotiations, but said the U.S. did not respond positively. Abu Zuhri also stated that Hamas remains unconcerned about its future, asserting that operations are ongoing despite the military imbalance with Israel. And for more in-depth view, we now move to Hala Al-Hamalawi in our newsroom. Hala.
Thank you so much, Hani. And for further analysis, we're joined from Cairo by the former Assistant Foreign Minister, Ambassador Dr. Mohammed Hijazi. Welcome to Qnews, Ambassador Hijazi. Now, how does the call of President Abdel Fattah Sisi for an end to Israeli aggression actually reflect Egypt's foreign policy priorities? And how does the Egyptian president's emphasis on humanitarian aid align with Egypt's historical role in the region?
Thank you very much and good afternoon, Hala. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi very clear message through his speech in Baghdad a couple of days ago reflects Egypt's firm stance to overcome the current situation in Gaza and the war crime, the ongoing war crime that is committed under the vision of the international community. And the support of Israel, of course, is one of the reason coming from certain Western centers is very crucial. President Abdel Fattah Sisi yesterday, in his meeting with Mossad Bullis, the advisor to President Trump, was also very clear, as well as Dr. Badr Abdelati in his parallel negotiation with Mossad Bullis. I think the message was clear, sent not only to the United States, but also to the world community, that Gaza and the Palestinian question is the key to stabilizing the region and stopping the carnage, which is still with us for almost a year and a half now, has to be stopped. The Egyptian technical teams on security and negotiation are in Doha, working hand in hand with the Qatari and the Americans to bring something to the very disturbing scene that we are witnessing in Gaza today, while we are talking about limited entry of humanitarian assistance, and while we are talking about width of suggestion and initiative we keep seeing people killed by the clock. Like we have 51 up till midday killed in Gaza, and by the end of the day, we'll have more killings. Israel is defying the world community. They're saying that we will do that. Tell us, what will you do? Stop us. So I think we need to bring in some practicality in the world community's positioning. We heard Guterres a couple of minutes ago, your intro, and it is very important statement. But tell us, what will you do? The Israelis are defying not only the United States and the world community, unless there is a complicity, which is...
Yes. Your Excellency, Ambassador Higazi, you're talking about practicality here. So in light of today's summit between President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and his Lebanese counterpart, Joseph Aoun, in what ways can cooperation between Egypt and Lebanon support broader efforts to address Israeli transgressions in the region, given, of course, its continued illegal occupation of Lebanese, Syrian, and Palestinian territories?
This is another chapter. Lebanon is also facing Israeli aggression. 5 points in the Lebanese border territory are under the control of the Israeli army. This new occupation is a new seed to destabilizing the region, and Lebanon needs the world community support to what has been agreed even by the American and the Israelis, that 1701 resolution has to be completed in all its aspects to safeguard the Lebanese army movement to control the border area. Israeli full withdrawal is important. Egypt will support Lebanon in all what is related to this issue, and keep the sovereignty of Lebanon intact and move towards reconstruction and establishing new life to the affected regions. Of course, it's very important. It's another reflection of the destabilizing role Israel is playing not only in Gaza and Palestine, but goes to Lebanon, occupying lands in Syria. And I think the American president, after his very important visit to the Gulf, have understood that there is opportunities and economic drive that is stopped by the Israeli relentless effort to disrupt the region and bring in violence everywhere they go. I think the difference is not between the United States and Israel now. The difference is between us all and Benjamin Netanyahu. He has to be removed, and he will soon, with his right wing, will face criminal courts, not only inside their own country, but also worldwide.
Yes. Your Excellency, how does the forced displacement order in Khan Younis reflect broader military strategy, and what are the potential consequences of the Israeli army's extensive ground operations in Gaza?
This is not the first announcement of its kind. This is the fifth announcement of its kind. So you can imagine people for 5 times moving from one place to another. This is inhumane, and this is unacceptable. And if the Israeli are challenging the whole world, saying that we will do this, what will you do? I think we should do something. We should go to the international forum of peace and security, I mean the Security Council, and raise our voices to condemn Israel, and maybe to call for a resolution that the United States might abstain, like President Obama did in a given moment when the Israelis committed a previous crime, which seems part of their mindset, and this mindset has to be changed.
So does Netanyahu's announcement of allowing the entry of aid into Gaza contradict the ultimate objectives of his military escalation in Gaza?
I think there is many elements in this analysis. One is there is a pressure, definitely, coming from the community. I think everybody now, even allied with Israel, allies with Israel, are all against the practice. No one really can adhere to support or even to justify the crime which we are witnessing on cameras. I guess the Israelis trying to observe the American and international community pressure. I think they are pressured Hamas by this operation, which is a way of negotiating under arms, as Benjamin Netanyahu said. But remember that many casualties will happen till the wrong minds understands that this is very costly, and it will cause not only humanitarian casualties on the Palestinian sides. Many Israeli soldiers also will lose their life to come to the same conclusion that we could have achieved in last January ceasefire agreement reached by Israel.
Mm-hmm. Well, from Cairo, that was former Assistant Foreign Minister, Ambassador Dr. Mohammed Hijazi. Thank you so much for joining us here on Q News, and thank you so much for your valuable insights. Always pleasure having you, Your Excellency. Now we go back to you, Hani, in our studio to resume our bulletin.
Thank you, Hela. Israeli occupation forces have continued their military siege on Tulkarm and refugee camps for 113 days, with Nur Shams camp under lockdown for 100 days. The area remains under heavy military presence, with homes turned into outposts, civilians barred from returning, and bulldozers demolishing properties. Over 20 buildings have been destroyed recently as part of a broader demolition plan. Checkpoints, patrols and road closures have paralyzed movement, especially near Jabara Bridge. Several buildings have been seized and converted into military posts. The Palestinian Journalists Syndicate has reported that 219 journalists and media workers, including 30 women, have been killed in Israeli attacks since October 7th of 2023. The syndicate also recorded 430 injuries and the deaths of 685 family members of Palestinian journalists. It condemned what it described as a systematic policy of targeting media workers. According to the syndicate, around 1,000 journalists in Gaza are enduring repeated displacement. Ladies and gentlemen, we now go live to Washington, D.C. for the White House Press Secretary Carolina Leavitt, who is holding a briefing. Let's watch.
Because of the last administration's weakness.
Does he still want to meet Putin personally?
I think the president would certainly be open to that, but let's see how this call goes today.
What's the status of the secondary sanctions package? The president's been talking about that. You haven't imposed them yet, but is that still on the table?
I think everything's on the table, yes. And again, I won't get ahead of the president in any commitments or decisions, but certainly it's something he's been looking at and discussing.
Hi, Ken. I want to ask you about the House budget bill. So does the president agree with Republicans behind this bill that Medicaid work requirements should be implemented as soon as 2026?
So the president wants to preserve and protect Medicaid for Americans who this program was intended for, the most vulnerable in our society: pregnant women, low-income families, seniors, those who truly need these benefits. And it should be going to people who physically cannot work. We want to see able-bodied Americans at least working 20 hours per week, whether that's part-time or full-time, whether that's even looking for work or volunteering for 20 hours a week if they are receiving Medicaid. These are common sense provisions. These are common sense changes that were actually introduced by former Democrat President Clinton. They've been supported by every Democrat president since, including the previous president, Joe Biden. But again, these are common sense reforms to ensure that those that this program was intended for receive those benefits.
And then just a quick follow-up. Is the president okay with this bill adding to the deficit?
This bill does not add to the deficit. In fact, according to the Council of Economic Advisors, this bill will save $1.6 trillion. And the president absolutely understands and hears the concerns of fiscal conservatives and of Americans who want to get our fiscal house in order. That's what the intention of this bill is. There's $1.6 trillion worth of savings in this bill. That's the largest savings for any legislation that has ever passed Capitol Hill in our nation's history. The next bill that even comes close was $800 billion. That's less than half of the savings that we see in the One Big Beautiful Bill. And so the goal of this bill is to produce economic growth, to cut taxes, and to get our fiscal house in order. And this is the right step in the right direction towards doing that.
Thanks.
Edward.
Yes, thanks.
And then I'll go to you.
Thanks,
You're
Jess.
welcome.
I want to get the president's reaction to Moody's downgrading the credit rating of the United States.
Sure. Well, look, the president talked about this over the weekend. The Secretary of Treasury also talked about it. When you look at the world has confidence in the United States of America and our economy once again. The president just last week secured trillions of dollars in investments from countries in the Middle East. We have seen trillions of dollars of investments flowing into our economy since the president took office. That is because America or people around the world have confidence in the United States of America. And if you also just look at the raw economic data that we're seeing, last week when we were out of town, inflation dropped once again. Oil prices are dropping, gas prices are dropping. The president has added nearly 500,000 jobs to the American economy already. So there's a lot of optimism in this economy, and the president disagrees with that assessment.
And I want to ask you one more thing, if I could. On your Middle East trip, the United Arab Emirates is getting some of the most advanced AI chips, and there's agreements there. The UAE is the newest member of BRICS. Is there a concern from the president that those chips and the technology will pass through to China, India, Russia, and Iran?
Part of going to the Middle East was to ensure that the United States, that this part of the region, our Gulf partners, know that the United States of America is there for them again, and that they should be investing in the United States, not in China. And these AI agreements, particularly the one the Secretary of Commerce signed in the UAE, has security guarantees to ensure that China is not getting the advantage, but the United States is getting the advantage when it comes to AI, and that the UAE and the U.S. are working hand in hand together to invest in this space. So read the agreements, there are security guarantees, and this was a great trip for the country, no doubt. Go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline. Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel has said today that Israel will take control of all of Gaza. Is that a goal that President Trump is comfortable with or that he supports?
I'll have to talk to the president about those comments as they just came, I believe, from the prime minister this morning, and I'll let him speak on that. The president has made it very clear he wants to see this conflict in the region end. He wants all hostages to be released. He was pleased that Eden Alexander was returned home safely to his loving family. The president spoke with Eden directly while we were traveling to the Middle East last week. As for the prime minister's comments, I'll let the president himself respond to those. Sure.
Two questions. One, how involved does the president intend to be directly in talking to House members about the bill over the next couple of weeks or the next week?
Sure. Well, over the weekend, the president was in direct conversation and communication with the Speaker of the House.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt from Washington, D.C., talking about Trump, who is ready to meet the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Also, they addressed the Moody's downgrading of the U.S. economy. Leavitt also spoke about President Trump's Gulf trip, trying to encourage the GCC countries to invest in the U.S., especially in the artificial intelligence sector, rather than China. And she also mentioned that Trump wants to protect Medicaid to service the needy, the low-income brackets, the pregnant women, and the seniors. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin, but here's a reminder of today's main stories. The Egyptian president urges an end to the Israeli aggression on Gaza. Netanyahu announces lifting the Gaza blockade to allow limited humanitarian aid. And Israel orders the evacuation of Younis amid an imminent attack warnings. These are all the news that we have for this hour, but please don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNewsEGY to stay informed. I'm Henny Saif. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Q News.